Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to day 3 of the Artist 2024 conference. I'm delighted to introduce you today to our day 3 keynote speaker for today's session, Pam Yang from the V&A. She's the head registrar, documentation and systems, and she leads the collections management team at the Victoria and Albert Museum, London, and she oversees the intricate systems, data and processes that form the backbone of the V&A extensive collections. And these collections are offered to the public through free displays, temporary exhibitions, and the amazing Explore the Collections, which is the V&A online catalog that our art and design students love and use for both their academic and creative research. Pam is a trained archaeologist, and she worked for 14 years at the British Museum, managing projects for documentation and digitization, and she's been at the V&A for 9 years, and today she's going to talk about some of the amazing projects she's leading, currently leading at the V&A. On a personal note, I used to work, I had the privilege of working with Pam at the V&A for 2 years before joining Middlesex University, so I'm very pleased to introduce her today, and I'm looking forward to hear her keynote talk. So I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I just set a timer going so I don't overrun, and I've got my notes here. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to Helena for that lovely introduction, and also to the organisers for inviting me here to speak, and to all our speakers over the last 2 days for their fascinating and interesting talks. As you will have gathered from Irena's introduction, I am not a librarian, I am not an artist, I am not an expert in AI, so why am I here? I've been working in the GLAM sector for over 2 decades, well over 2 decades, and I've been using digital tools for most of that career. So, AI, documentation, etc. I'm going to go through. I'm going to be looking at text-based tools. Yesterday it was all about the art and creation. What I'll be looking at more is how we can use text-based AI tools to help or hinder our work in museums. This was the first thing that came up when I searched for AI and libraries, and this is possibly one of the challenges we have. We like doing our jobs, we like writing. Do we want something that's going to churn out more and more of it without us being able to stop it? Hopefully not. But let's see where we go. So I'm going to look at some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, and also some of the projects that the V&A is working on. But to start with, what do I mean by documentation in the sector? For me, I would go with this Wikipedia idea, cataloguing. Cataloguing is the process in different kinds of institutions, whether it's your libraries, archives, museums, about different kinds of material, books, pictures, museum objects, etc. At a high level, that's very much it. I'm using different standards, of course, such as MARC in libraries, ICG in archives, Spectrum in museums, and it's all about data. I think that's the key thing about cataloguing. It's all about data. So, we've all been cataloguing in GLAM institutions since we've existed. Going back to the days of the library in Alexandria and onwards, there have been catalogues. These are some examples of catalogues we work with at V&A. Whether they're handwritten ones there on the left-hand side, or these printed ones on the right. Both of these date from the late 19th century. They contain a lot of data about our collections. Just make sure I'm not saying anything. The practitioners may have changed, the techniques have changed, but the concept at the heart is that human input of what we acquire, what we catalogue, and what we consider to be important to catalogue about our collections. Nowadays we do it on databases, we put these on OCR scanners, we turn them into labels, we make this information accessible, possibly in a way we didn't used to in the past. But this information is, I would argue, as much as our collections, what makes our organisations what they are. Whether we're a public art gallery or a library making information available to our students, it's all at the heart of it. So this is a record from the V&A's catalogue system of an artist's book. This is a museum-style record, the sort of thing we collect here. It's it's not just about the content, it's about what it is, where it came from, who made it, why it was made. We have lots of index terms in green, so all those green terms are indexed. And there's also descriptions which are below the screenshot, and we have images. This record tells us the history of this object. We can include all its acquisition history, exhibition history, etc. It's all there, and this is what is pushed to our public catalogue online. Every field there, which is ETC in brackets, which you may or may not be able to see, goes straight through to our website unedited. And we usually have a traffic light by the image and look at rocks in front. Where's my traffic light? Usually there is something telling us if that image can go online or not. This is another record for that same object. This is the National Art Library catalogue, so it's catalogued to MARC standards, and it contains very different information. It's, again, got some production information, but it focuses a lot more on the subjects, the terminologies, the categorization and keywords than we do in a museum. And this one, if you look at it, the physical description, just below the horizontal line, is simply 40 unnumbered pages. Illustrations, 31 centimetres. I'm not going to go back to the museum catalogue one, but just to give you an idea, it begins in the description field. This work is a collaboration between poet Bill Manhire and printmaker Andrew Drummond. Manhire's poem is a reflection on both the natural world and on language, and compromises the text, Dawn Water Poem, printed at the top and foot of the page. And it carries on for 10 more paragraphs. So it's a very different sort of cataloguing we're dealing with, but the same object. I'd also note we don't just catalogue physical objects. Those of you yesterday will of course recognise this object, which is held in the permanent collections of the V&A. This is the ZC show, which Jake talked so fascinatingly and enthusiastically about yesterday. So we've had to find a way to document AI collections in our collections database. And I'm not going to talk about how we could document AI, but how we might use AI or in machine learning to help us with what we already do. But this is available in our collections database. And this does have a traffic light box. So who am I and what is the V&A? Just to come back a step, Helena has already taken half my thunder and said who I am and what I do. So I have worked in documentation. As a child I wanted to be a librarian, but I think that's because I was in North East Scotland and that was one of the places to get out of the rain rather than the fascination with anything else. I trained as an archaeologist, specialised in Egyptology. Eventually decided that was a bit much like hard physical labour, moved into the museum sector indoors, and since then I have worked with data throughout my entire career. I've worked in local history museums, I've transcribed index cards, I've taught children to fire Napoleonic muskets, which was more health and safety, less data. I have worked at the British Museum, I've catalogued flints, I've procured systems. As Helena said, I'm now head of collections management at the Victoria and Albert Museum. So at the V&A, we aim to be the world's leading museum of art, design and performance. We aim to inspire creativity in all our visitors, whether in person or online. We hold over 1.7 million objects, 1,000 archives, and another million more books in our collections, as well as almost 1.97 million digital assets, images and digital files. My team don't look after the library, but we do look after library data when it comes into the collection systems apart from the library system. So we are supporting the cataloguing of everything from 5,000-year-old Egyptian ceramics to contemporary works of art made in a digital sphere. And we have got a huge backlog of documentation. We're still acquiring over 4,000 objects a year. We're a very small team. Everyone wants to be doing more fun stuff than keywording and metadata. So what we're trying to look at is, can AI help us anywhere? Can we take machine learning, help us in our work, but not take our jobs? that's the balance point we're looking at. So, the opportunities. Over the last 2 days, we've heard a great deal about how machine learning is affecting our work. It's helping artists, making amazing works of art, new creations, exciting things. What I want to look at is, as I said, how it might be able to help us with this basic work that lots of us do. We're all information managers, data scientists, if we're working in a library in any way, or a museum. So how can machine learning help us? And is there money in it? Maybe that's the question as well, because, as we all know, keywording and metadata is the least glamorous side of the work. We all want to do the exciting things, the interpretation, the outreach. The only time people want to give us money to do anything to do with metadata tends to be when things go wrong. When objects go missing, when catalogues fail, then suddenly there's money to fix the problems, but there isn't necessarily that money to keep us going at the beginning. So, opportunities. We, as a sector, have a lot of data held in our catalogues, in our collections, in the stacks on the servers. Can we use that existing data to train any sort of machine learning model to help with the documentation of new or badly catalogued works, to pull up more data about the collections for use in internal collections management projects, for external projects? Perhaps there's tools around image recognition or providing basic information to machine learning models to automate some of our cataloguing processes. So, as I said, we keep creating more. Can we use this data to create new records? We've been considering using things like image recognition tools to look at pages of a book, such as the sales catalogue, to pull out data to see if it could figure out what the images are, to use text recognition software to pull out that metadata and add it to the record. We haven't got the money at the moment, so we're not doing that, but it's something we're exploring. And it's something which the wider sector is very much looking at. Last week I was at a conference about digital asset management in the commercial sector, and 2 multinational companies were talking about using machine learning to do all their keywording and run all their advertising campaigns and basically take out the junior level of staff who would normally do that. So they just wanted to say, no, we stop, we don't do anything. One was BP, they were looking at turning all their advertising over to AI to run at all their image libraries, which is quite scary, really. But back to our sector and back to what we can do with the less resources. This is a sort of record we have in our system, and I'm sure lots of you have records of this sort. It's got a photo, it's got a number, and that's it. Good luck to anyone wanting to find this online. Good luck and Godspeed. It's a drawing of the hilt of some sort of sword. I'm not a weapons specialist, it's like 2 years in the military museum, it's a thing. So what we, again, would like to explore in the future is, can we use software, a data model, to look at that and say, it's a pen and ink drawing, it's a sword, there's a human face in it, and at least give us some keywords to help with that searching. What we're not looking at the moment is anything to get you to write free text descriptions, offering up this image as a prompt to ChatGPT, that sort of thing. We want to make sure we keep that human voice, the voice of the expert in our cataloguing, because that's what we're known for, is being the experts. We need to keep that, I would argue. And of course there are issues still with things like ChatGPT, where it sounds fine until you actually read it and realise it's had what's called a hallucination, or it's gone completely off piste. So we need to be careful with that at the stage we're in. There have been projects in the sector which have shown AI can be used for keywording. And this is a very interesting example from the Museum of the Royal Navy with a university in Southampton. They were using AI, again, to look at images and keyword them. And interestingly, as they say, it was AI's ability to label records from the perspective of a visitor So they are categorized by what people are searching for, as well as the official name of the ship, or what we as information scientists might wish to call that to keep it within a controlled metadata hierarchy. So this is something that is going on, and it's very interesting, and it is on the news page of their website if you want to read the whole article about it. There are other examples going on in the world as well as this one. I'm sure we've already heard about some, we'll hear about more today. Trinity College Dublin has been using AI to transcribe handwritten historic documents, showing how AI can extract that further information from the material held in our archives, using handwritten text recognition models to turn it into machine-readable text. In theory, that can then be translated through various tools and on again, but of course that could lead into a game of Chinese whispers if we're not careful. So the finally translated text in modern English might bear a little relation to what was written a few hundred years ago or 1,000 years ago. The Science Museum has also been using entity recognition, same as the Royal Navy Museum. They have been scanning internal catalogue records, looking for people and places in particular, which it can then link to third-party sources such as Wikipedia to give external information back into their catalogue. Another example, which was internal only and hasn't come to fruition yet, from 2022 to 2023, the British Museum was running an internally funded project to trial machine learning to geocode and also map place names in their authority fields within their catalogue records. They focused on Egyptian ones. And while they were able to explore automated geocoding, there were various issues. They needed a lot of human intervention to enhance the data beforehand. The machine learning failed when it hit things like transliterations. It couldn't necessarily match the Arabic. It couldn't match transliterations. Anything it wasn't quite sure of went, near Egypt, and middle of the Mediterranean. So either they found Atlantis or the system isn't working yet. So it's getting there, but slowly. So I'd also say it's essential if we are creating this data, we flag it as AI generated, so that we know which parts are machine created, rather than that given by the experts in the field. Just to go back to another example we are considering at the V&A. Again, this is very much early stages. We don't have any funding for it yet. Because we've got over 1.7 million database records, we have a lot of terminologies, we've migrated from a lot of systems, we have a lot of legacy data and a lot of uncontrolled fields which should be in controlled fields. Most of that is object names. We have three issues, I've only put two of them up here. We've got free text in object name fields that we shouldn't have. On the left is a version of the Getty terminology we're currently using. It dates from 2007. On the right is the current version. And the three things do not map in our collections. We think 80% of our collection records, that's a lot, but 1.4 million records need at the moment manual intervention to fix them. And that's not going to happen. So we are hoping we can find some sort of automated tool that we can teach to look at the three sources and map what we've got either free text or in old terminology and bring it over to the new one. And we're going to be starting to trial one of those with our software suppliers soon and see how we go and see how much it costs and how much it can actually figure out. But given this is just some of the books, we suspect it will probably not get very far before it can't quite figure out what sort of book we're in, unless we trial and trial and trial. So, that's some of the ideas of what we are looking for at the V&A. We have a project which is now almost finished, which is very exciting. We are using AI, or more correctly, machine learning, to measure the fragility of V&A collection objects in our database, which has been an interesting trial of what we're trying to do. So, at the V&A, one of my images has vanished, at the V&A, we are opening our new storehouse in the Olympic Park in May next year. It's called V&A East Storehouse, and it will offer a new way for the public to access our collections. We will have 250,000 museum objects in one building. We'll also have archives and some of our library material. And there will be a system with the current working name of Order an Object. We're trying to find a new name for it that isn't quite so formal sounding, but we haven't got one yet. I think the things that hold your history, other such names being suggested by directors. However, our collections are very varied. This is a small sample. We've got comics, we've got plastic chairs, we've got ancient books, we've got ceramics, plaster casts, wooden models, Venetian glass, etc., etc. They're all held in trust for the public, and so it's only right. You should be able to come in and see our objects. We don't want to gatekeep them in the way that some institutions do, especially museums. We need to be a student. You can only see 2 objects with book ages in advance. There will be security, of course. There will be supervision, and there will be an appointment system, but there will also be some drop-in appointments available. Anyone in theory can come in and ask to see any object that is in that building, because they want to, not because they need to, not because their tutor says they must, but just because they're wandering in and they are fascinated by pink plastic chairs. Fine, come in and see our pink plastic chairs. Touch it, look at it, photograph it, it's fine. Maybe not always touch them, but there will be some allowances, some material will be touched. However, some objects we can't bring to you. They're on the top shelf of the top of pallet racking on the 3rd floor. Not happening. Or it takes 20 technicians to move them. Or maybe they're just too fragile to handle. And we could take you to see them, but we can't move it. How do we tell how fragile it is? What do we even mean by how fragile something is? That's not something we've ever recorded. It'd be easy to say all glass is fragile, but a glass brick is not nearly as fragile as a piece of silk textile. So it has to have more nuance than that. So for the last year, we have been trying to train a model that will take data from our existing collections information and tell us how fragile our collections are. I'm not going to go into details of the model. We have a very able person internally who has built this for us as part of their day-to-day job. But this is the fragility model. I'm not going to pretend to know what all the words mean. I know it's built in Python. I know we only use V&A data, so we have not gone externally at all. We have completed 7 phases of training in version 1 of the data. All the data went through the model 9 times, and then we did that 7 times to try to do our training of the model. And when the validation loss stopped decreasing, when the results stayed pretty much level, we stopped and tested it in reality. And then we built version 2 and tested that against another set of records. Then we tested version 3 to do more records. We also realized, in order to test if the model worked, we needed to know how fragile our staff thought some of our records were. So we did what we called a rate-a-thon, and we bribed staff with Amazon vouchers to come and rate our objects. And they were given the information and told, look at the image, look at the material, look at the condition, look at the age, and tell us if you think that's not fragile, a bit fragile, somewhat fragile, very fragile, or no. And go for it. So we got 6,826 objects rated over 3 days. The first day, we got 3.34 thousand. Next day, it was 2.49 thousand. And then the next day, one person in orange did lots. And then we had stopped them and said, you're actually going to bias our data set if you keep going. We cannot just have you deciding how fragile our collection is. But this did take a lot of organisation because we tried to do it without bribery, and it didn't work. People were, oh no. But as soon as you offer up an Amazon voucher, they will come. And we had curators do this, conservators, collections managers. We also had some for front of house staff. We got a real pool of staff across the museum to do it. And this is where we're at. at the moment, which probably means very little, but this is where we are. We currently we have decided a tolerance is 1 rating either side of what the human thought it was. And we're currently 88% are within tolerance. We want to get to 95% within tolerance. We've got 56% of predictions are actually correct. We want to get to 75% are actually correct. So if you read across the way, that's what humans thought. That of this set of 1,770 objects, 560 were not fragile, 42 were bad or very bad, and 111 could not be rated. The model, on the other hand, decided only 406 were very good. Most of them were a bit fragile. Nothing was too fragile to handle, and only 56 couldn't be rated. So we've got a bit of concern at that bottom end about whether it's just going to end up pushing stuff through to the public which is too fragile to handle, or is it our curators are thinking everything's too fragile to handle, and it's not. So we're going to be doing some more ratings with humans and keep running the model to see where we can get to. So that's where we're at the moment. We aim to have it all live by the end of the year, so the database is populated by Christmas and can be checked. And this is what we do. So we've got our database record for VAS, and we flag it as AI generated with the rating. So we'll flag that rating. You see on this one, AI went, it's not fragile. The same day a curator came in and went, oh yes it is. So we have to check some of that as well, and that's part of what my team have to do, and go back and just check if curators are actually being overly cautious, or if it's the model which is being a bit more cavalier. So we still need to look at that, as I say, as well. We also need to look at our data on the system, because we have got records which can't be rated. So what we're looking at is what records both humans and the model say, I can't rate, there's not enough information. Is it things like that record I showed you earlier, where it just had a number, name, and a picture? Or are there other fields which are missing? So, of course, the issue is then there's no information, the public won't find them, so it doesn't matter if we can't rate them, because no one can find them to ask for them. So that's another internal question. However, what we have done is found money to throw 6 members of staff at our database for 3 years to update our basic documentation, which will help make our collections accessible and help the AI model as well. So it will help from both sides. So, of course, it's only valuable if this information is in here, but we do need to keep checking it. We will be dip sampling as we go, and what we will also have to do is look at when do we need to retrain the model. Once we get it running, can we leave it? Do we need to go and retrain it? So there's a lot to think about there. So these are our learning points from that project we have run. There's been a few more, but at the point where we're at now, we got the best staff buy-in when they were adding value to the records. We got the very best when we offered them money, but if you can't afford to do that, when we said you will be adding value, we're not taking your job, this is something you don't do, but we could get a machine to do on top of your work. That really helped us. However, it took a lot of staff time both to build the model and train the model and test the data, do the human testing, and also try to get it within tolerance. We've been doing this for a year now, and we've probably got 6 months to go. And that's because we're doing it as part of our day-to-day jobs. We haven't got a team who are just doing this. As with all organisations, we have to find this as part of our ongoing jobs. We're using internal data to maintain that internal voice. We haven't decided to go and look at other organisations to see what they're doing with fragility and take a model from outside. We want to build our own model so we know it's our ratings. And we're also using internal staff to monitor the outputs as well and keep an eye on it. We haven't got this externally invigilated. So that's our model, and that's our fragility rating, and that's all great. But what about the challenges? I think I've already alluded to some of these as we've gone through. So hopefully, and some of these will have been raised, and although I say challenges, I don't think they should stop us, it's just always things to consider. The first thing everyone has said is this going to take our jobs? Are you trying to get rid of documentation officers? How will new entrants join the sector if they're not doing documentation and volunteer data entry jobs at the beginning? These quotes I found on the American Alliance of Museums blog, and they struck me, and what's been said as well over the past 2 days. AI is not machines against people. It's people using machines. We create the data, we choose the data the model will aggregate, we tell it what to do with that data, we build the frameworks, we do all of that. If we ignore that, if we just leave it to its own devices, that's where we're in trouble. But we can control these. We need the policies to make sure the AI is in the correct framework, that we have machine learning as one of our tools within that toolkit of managing our collections, documenting our collections, making them accessible, but it doesn't have to take our jobs. If we haven't got that data, if it's still on index cards, if it's still in someone's head, without it, the models don't work. So we still need people to get the data in there. And good AI outputs, as we've shown in our fragility test, only come up when we've got good data for the models to work on. We're always cataloguing, we're always adding more to our collections, we're always wanting to surface different information, so I don't think that this is going to take our jobs, much as there is hype that it's going to do that. Our jobs will change, but I don't think they'll vanish, I hope. We've also got issues when people say, well, the records all look the same. Won't AI just come in and go, pop shards? Possibly. Can image recognition help? Possibly. To be honest, most of our records for these objects just say pop shard anyway, so that's what Victorian collectors were saying. Why should we be upset that a machine model does the same? So we, again, need to look at the quality, not just of data in, but the data we want to get out of our models. We want to see what information was pulled. It's got museum numbers, it can link images to records, it can tell us. Maybe it could tell us in the future about slip glazes, about decoration, it could possibly start to figure out sizes, there's all sorts of things like that. Of course, we need to look at things around the record when it's generated. Do we flag it as AI generated? Are there rights in any of that generated data? If it starts to manipulate images, etc., what do we do with that? There's also, as I've mentioned, that financial and resource implication to building these models, to making them suit, especially because external models in the long term may not suit your organisation, and they will require retraining and stuff like that as we build them. There's also the problem when if we give AI lots of information like this to train, it can start to hallucinate and throw up the wrong answers, especially when it's using large language models. It can start to perceive patterns that don't exist because it's been trained on them so much. It will start to see a human face where there isn't one. There was a model which was trained on images of pandas, and it started to see pandas anywhere. Turned it loose in the wild, and it started keyword pandas where there were no pandas. And of course, image generation ones, we all know the 6 fingers, eyes in different directions, campfires inside tents, etc. So what if our data starts to hallucinate on us and our catalogues suddenly go rogue? Who's checking that? We need to look at that. But hopefully it won't. Another challenge is bias. We've heard a lot about that over the last 2 days, of course. So bias in the training data for cataloguing is quite important. AI, or machine learning, it's not intelligent. It doesn't have knowledge or semantic understanding of what the words and images being put into it mean. It only knows what we tell it. It's a shorthand for machine learning. So if the data we put in, especially from our historic catalogues, has got bias, it's just going to pick that up and run with it if we're not careful. The V&A was founded in 1851 in the wake of the Great Exhibition. Height of colonialism, we have a lot of collections from the British colonial past in our collections. They were documented in the Victorian period. That information persists in many places. So if we've got that colonial data in our collections, if we've got other data, for example, we have a lot of theatre performance collections, And some of the titles of those song sheets from the music hall days are quite colourful, shall we say. And we don't censor. We have very much go down a path of retain and explain where we can, if it's in the name of something. But that's going to get into our data, and goodness knows what it could start to throw out if we're not careful. So we need to look at these biases around race, around gender, sexuality, religion, etc., etc., etc. So, and be careful about how much in your training data, or it could pick them up and think, oh, actually, everything uses that word, and off we go. So, we've got these sort of biases, DNA. We've got bias in our collecting practices, where we collected from, who did the collecting. It was mostly white men who collected our collections, so it could start to pick up that. Our descriptions and cataloguing have got biases both in terms of problematic terminology, but also the types of words we use can be quite specific. We've got a lot of collections where the description simply says C for ceramic. What if it thinks that's the word for ceramic and runs with that? So it doesn't have to be problematic in certain ways, it could just be not correct. We've got bias from our staff, and we could have bias in who we collect. We have not collected enough female or non-binary artists. We're replacing that now. If the training data looked at our historic collecting, they would pick our artists and makers are male. If they look now at a specific project, like, oh, they only collect non-binary. That's interesting. And send it the other way. So we need to be careful about the data we train it on. And we're trying to do that in various projects. However, there also, on the flip side, are tools being created to try and remove this bias. So this is a project I'm a co-supervisor on at the V&A. We are working with the University of Oxford and a DPhil student to look at computational approaches in addressing problematic terminology and descriptions within V&A museum catalogues. Currently we don't use punctuation. So we came up with this with the Department of Engineering at Oxford. We have a student who is working on this, and we basically gave them the scope and said, you choose what is problematic. You choose the part of the V&A. We are not going to tell you what we think is problematic. You choose at this point in time what you think is problematic, because of course that's another issue. What is problematic changes as time changes. What is problematic now may not be the same in 20 years. It's certainly not the same as 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. So we're asking to look now and find a tool that might be able to work with us to at least flag these terms much more easily than we can and suggest replacements based on our current frameworks. And we're just in year 2 of that. So we have another year and a half to go at least. I only have a few slides, but I'll have to go with that here. Environmental impact. I'm so sorry, Jerry. I know this is one that's been concerning you over the last few days. So I did want to flag it when I'm not working in museums. I work for London Wildlife Trust. So environmental impact is something I'm very interested in. We're all working towards net zero. We have sustainability plans. One of the things mentioned a lot at the election today is around sustainability, net zero, carbon footprints. As has already been mentioned, data storage has got pretty much the same level of global emissions as the commercial airline industry at the moment. It's terrifying. That will change, hopefully, as global energy methods decarbonise. But AI, machine learning, requires that data to function. So it's only going to increase the amount of data required, the amount of data processing required, the amount of server farms. So it's driving up that use of electricity and water. I found these stats just to terrify you a little more. A web search driven by generative AI uses between 4 and 5 times the energy of a conventional Google search because it's trying to do a lot more with the data as it goes. It's trying to classify, summarize, generate all at the same time rather than just go and find something for you. The least carbon intensive text generation models, a ChatGPT type model, looked at in a study by the MIT, was responsible for as much CO2 as driving 1 litre. That's not very far. But if everyone in this room generates a little bit of text and does that 1,000 times, because one thing of AI is how quick it is, suddenly we're driving thousands of kilometres a day, even though we're very proud of using public transport and being very green. And the other estimate I saw is that AI alone will, by 2027, use the same as 50% of the amount of water the UK uses now, just to cool servers. Tools are being developed. It's not all blue. It's not all blue. There are lots of tools being developed. A lot of companies are actually using AI to try to figure out how to make AI more energy efficient, which seems a bit of a weird one, but that is one thing they are doing. So it's something to make sure it's in your sustainability policies at work if you're using AI. Think about that and make sure you speak to your sustainability teams. Think about what we're doing. Don't just rush in and do it because it's better than a paperless office, because it might not be. So that was cheerful. However, in summary, it's not all bad. A few things I think AI can support our cataloging data if it's deployed correctly. It can enhance the work for our staff rather than replace them. If the right training data is used, it's going to enhance our records, and the data we hold all about them, so that making sure the voice of the curator, the information manager, the archivist is still present in the record. We are still the experts, but we can use this tool to provide more information. And it doesn't matter what those algorithms throw up, we still need to be at the core of that data. To go back to the example I used at the beginning about the artist book that was catalogued in the V&A Collections catalogue and the NEL catalogue, I think it's possible that AI could create something like the library catalogue at its basic level, but we're not there for full interpretation and descriptive text of a museum one, and I'm not sure we ever will be, and I'm not sure we should ever want to be. But a basic record, basic help with keywording, being checked by documentation specialists, fleshed out by the experts, absolutely great. Make sure you think about all the costs before you go in, your financial costs. It costs a lot to build a model. There's the resource. It takes a lot of staff resource. Just talked about environmental. Consider all that when you're going in. I'd also say for most of us, the local models will be more useful than global tools such as ChatGPT, although I know we're going to be hearing about how they can help us later. But if you've got a specific project, build a specific tool, especially now. Be aware of all the ethical issues around bias, around use of others' data, around the outputs. And also there's a lot of hype around machine learning at the moment. Don't just do it because everyone else seems to be. Don't just jump on that bandwagon. We've been here for a long time as organisations. We're going to be here for a long time. We've got time to think about this and do it properly. And that, I think, is pretty much summary. One day, the robots are going to learn our losing our data too. It's not just going to take curators, etc., to do it. That's where we're aiming for, and that is all I have to say. Thank you very much.
First up, we have Rebecca Price. Rebecca is the Architecture, Urban Planning and Visual Resources Librarian at the University of Michigan, and also a former president of IRLIS North America. Can I ask you to please welcome Rebecca?
Thank you. Yeah, you can hear me well enough? Good. Yeah, it's great to be here. And I just keep hearing throughout the week or 3 days, just so many synergies and connections. It's really wonderful. So what I'm presenting today is a little bit of a case study of GPT and the search for scholarly information. How does that work? Magic. So the point, very briefly, of my presentation is that AI, specifically GPT tools, will dramatically change the way we find information and therefore the way we teach our students and researchers to find information. So in the next 10 minutes, I'll talk about how we as librarians can use GPT to improve our pursuit of scholarly information. As I suggest visually on the slide, it's a fast-moving train, a bit of a blur, so it's not surprising that we feel we're just hanging on for dear life. As an aside, I have just a very few images that, throughout my talk, and they're all AI generated, which for good or ill, I'm not sure. But the beginning of my journey was on a relatively traditional, though new for me, route. So beginning in the fall of 2023, so less than a year ago, I volunteered to teach several library instruction sessions to first-year general studies students. The sessions focused on using our catalog and databases effectively to find useful and scholarly resources. I discovered that the students were eager to learn about controlled vocabularies, such as the Library of Congress subject headings, and receptive to learning about how libraries structure information and how to use that structure or hierarchy to their advantage. This led to talking about concept building and search strategies, and I acknowledge that here in Britain you may use other cataloging systems, but I think the idea holds true. I was somewhat surprised at their interest in learning about how information is structured and organized. Described as digital natives, these students were born in around 2005 and have always had Google. I mean, in the womb they had Google. So imagine they somehow innately know how to search effectively. But I would argue that their searching skills are not unlike throwing a dart at a dartboard. I think that growing up in the digital environment, they perceive a randomness to information, relying on algorithms to sort through the muck and provide some organization. So it's very appealing to them that the data a library system provides gives them some control in the search for information. So the subject headings you're seeing are the result of a case study that I used in class, and I'll use it throughout my talk today. These are subject headings associated with a book about the concept of the 15-minute city. So moving from LC subject headings, I reminded students of all the other places they can find keywords to help them develop search strategies. Here are examples from our library catalog and from our article database. I impressed upon the students that once you notice all these lists in catalogs and databases and individual item records, you can begin creating specific and educated search strategies. And many of these students, because they were general studies students, will go on to STEM subjects in which they'll have to prepare systematic reviews. So this information, these skills, are foundational for the university education. And then AI. So that brings us to the end of last fall. And this is not to say, obviously, that AI just happened this year. But for me, it took on an urgency and a presence that could not be ignored. While my first preference might have been to very quickly retire and not do this same thing, I realized my only real option was to immerse myself in it and learn. So I began attending symposia, read articles, volunteered on a newly formed library AI committee, began experimenting with tools, applied to come to this conference, which luckily I got funding for, and participated in workshops. Now none of this makes me an expert, but I have learned a lot. And a big push came from the fact that my university, which is a large research university, developed our own GPT tool, which was launched in September 2023 and has been promoted with great fervor. And literally daily at noon, I get an email saying, please join us for this and that workshop on XYZ having to do with AI. The reason the university developed it was for accessibility reasons. It's free to the university community. There's also a certain amount of control of using your own materials as well as materials the university provides. So our local it's UM for University of Michigan, UM GPT tools include a GPT portal allowing one to submit chat queries. UM Mazy is a tool allowing researchers to load their own corpus of materials or materials to which they have rights, against which they can query or build further works. And the GPT toolkit is for other advanced uses, which I have not tried yet. Just a few definitions. So a key characteristic of GPT, or generative pre-trained transformers, is the phrase pre-trained. The model is trained in natural language processing and fine-tuned to generate responses to large language model, or LLM, queries. The idea of LLM queries takes us to the second characteristic, transformers, which reflects the ability of GPT to read full sentences. So rather than relying on word-matching algorithms that analyze word occurrence, word order, word frequency, word proximity, generative AI revolves around neural networks, mimicking human brain to process information via interconnected neurons. And I, of course, should make that up. That definition I paraphrased came from an article called 7 Things You Should Know About Generative AI. And in my last slide, I provide 4 citations, one of which is that article. So clearly, GPT has caused the sands to shift. When we think of our role teaching students and faculty how to find information, GPT tools have significantly changed the searching landscape. So in pre-GPT times, we worked with a relatively stable information structure based on controlled or semi-controlled vocabularies, which you'd apply simply or in Boolean strings to query the metadata of a database. With LLM searching, the directness and relative transparency of pre-GPT searching is replaced by a more dynamic, interpretive, and somewhat opaque approach. I think very much of the linear logic versus fuzzy logic that Dean Canning was talking about earlier this week, and his drawings, which was just wonderful to show that. Another striking aspect of the shifting sands of GPT search is that as enticing as your results will often be, they will also be inconsistent, incomplete, and sometimes erroneous, which we call hallucinations, as you know. So I think our job as librarians is to help our researchers understand that and find their own solid ground. So I'll share just a few chat conversations I've had with UMGPT and ChatGPT, which is an open AI product. In this query, I don't know if you can see it all, but I'll explain a little bit. In this query, I asked for counter-arguments against the idea of the 15-minute city. Interestingly, I think the ideas, the suggestions they offer are not bad at all. They offer the user quite solid ideas for further investigation. But notably, when I followed up by asking for 5 citations of works reflecting these ideas, 3 of the 5 were erroneous. Plausible, but false. So they were real journal titles, they were real authors working in the field, they were not real articles. This very typical example reveals the wonder of GPT, the hazards of GPT, as well as the potential value of GPT as an information literacy tool. So the assignment to students might be to evaluate the chat response critically, looking for fault or omissions, and then check for the authenticity of the citations. So connecting back to my work in promoting the value of controlled vocabularies in research, I discovered a promising use of GPT is to ask it to generate Library of Congress subject headings for your particular topic. So I tested this task on 2 different GP tools, Scala GPT, which is a subset or a part of ChatGPT, and UMGPT. I asked for the LC subject headings related to the concept of the 50-minute city. And interestingly, I got somewhat different results from the 2 tools, a few more from Scala GPT than UMGPT. What you can see here, red is where there's a direct correlation from the 2 sides. Blue is where there's a similar vocabulary, but not quite. And these are all, by the way, real Library of Congress subject headings, so not hallucinations. I checked every one. And black is the unique terms in each. And so I found that very interesting. 2 tools would bring you very different results. Then I asked the tools to provide keywords, not LC subject headings, and they responded similarly, with some overlap, but not as much as one might expect. So here you see Scala GPT gave me far fewer than UMGPT. Red, again, is the direct match across the 2 tools. Blue is similar terms, and white is unique. So again, there's quite a lot of white on the screen. So it's quite interesting. This slide shows keywords generated manually, so created from the semi-controlled vocabularies of subject terms presented in databases and individual articles. Words lead via algorithm from the content of scholarly work. So this is the kind of list that I would create with students last fall before trying all the GPT tools. And here what you can see is red is words that is direct correlation with one of the the keyword list from the GPT tools. The white is words unique and different. So again, a lot of white on the screen. So the lesson for me is that GPT is not a replacement of, but an augment to existing practices. So I'll conclude by saying that GPT tools are not be all and end all, not yet. They provide a starting place and a nice base on which researchers can build, but it is a fast-moving terrain, so expect change. And here are the references which I can share on the Padlet at another time. Quite good articles. And I thank you, and I look forward to questions here.
Very pleased to welcome Mark Pompelia,
who is the Visual Material Resource Librarian at the Rhode Island School of Design, and another past president of ARLAS North America. Mark is going to be speaking to us about the material order, which is a shared database project, and its potential with AI. I think we're just about ready. Okay. Please help me to welcome Mark Pompelia.
Hi everyone, I am Mark Pompelia, and I have been the Visual Material Resource Librarian at Fleet Library at Rhode Island School of Design since 2010. My gratitude goes to the program organizers for accepting my speculative talk on the possibilities of enhancements by artificial intelligence to a shared database project called Material Order. As a little background, Visual Material Resource Center oversees most of the library's non-text collections. The school's institutional repository with nearly 40,000 files on the Digital Commons platform and the material samples collection. The materials collection launched in 2009 with 3,000 items gleaned from faculty and department offices and has grown to over 40,000 items since then through faculty and student requests, librarian research and curation, and gift donations, making it the largest such academic collection in the United States. The collection has no singular acquisitions focus, but is instead encyclopedic to reflect the teaching and learning that occurs across RISD's nearly 24 departments. There are obvious stakeholder departments related to creative practice, but there are also allied departments that study material economies and the trajectories of material selection and use. The idea of a shared database sparked in 2011 at the first meeting of the newly formed RLSNA Materials Special Interest Group between close colleagues at Harvard University's Graduate School of Design and the RISD Library Director and myself. Geographic proximity to each other allowed the project to quickly advance, but the two libraries were coming from opposing angles. Harvard GSD with a materials database that needed to be replaced, and RISD without one at all. Those distinctions made a complementary difference in the development of the materials database schema. In 2015, the project team partnered with Collection Space, one of the platforms offered by the library services company Lyrasis, due to its native architecture made for the management of object-based collections. For 2 years, the team worked on a metadata schema, and by 2017, the back end launched with a fairly complete authority table that grew out of that schema. A browser plugin developed in 2019 by Collection Space allowed the project to build a WordPress front end that serves as a website for the consortium itself at materialorder.org, as well as a place for that plugin to load and facilitate federated searching across all partner collections. And I'd like to call attention to all 5 partner schools. It's not just RISD and JSD anymore, including Rebecca Price, who just at University of Michigan, who just preceded this talk. So here I'm going to show you some of that back end and how it populates the front end. Material order consists of 2 instances. One is the shared authority, and that everyone catalogs concepts and materials into. And the second reflects object records of the actual holdings in each participating collection that syncs with that central file. Logging into the shared material authority, I pulled up a record on acetylated wood under the product name Nicola. This record represents everything we know about the material and the manufactured product. In and of itself, it is a fairly complete record in the system with an extensive description and a number of entries under typical uses. And just to show you how it all comes together, here's the front-end search results on Nicola. The Collection Space browser plugin pulls in fields that we selected from that shared authority file that populate the top of the screen. It also loads fields from all the local files that have this material sample, fields that describe the objects by size and color, as well as a call number or holding location. So far, so good. Now onto the AI portion of the presentation with a possibly familiar illustration by Christopher Neiman. I really only began to pay attention to AI in the past year, starting at the 2023 RLSNA Annual Conference in Mexico City, and I appreciated the more advanced presentations that were delivered at the 2023 conference just a couple months ago in Pittsburgh, mostly in the area of outreach, and of course everything that we've been hearing the last couple days. But what was true then is still true now, as we've heard repeatedly, that AI is a tool. So we wonder, what can AI do faster, better, or even differently than what we do as project team members for both development of the back end or enhancements of the search portal? Here's a screen grab of an email I received just a couple days ago, typical of how AI stands to become a regular part of what we do as librarians. And I also want to reference an email yesterday from the Association of Architecture School librarians in the US, giving examples of helping students navigate daunting Library of Congress subject terms to find what they need. So kind of what we just saw reinforced from Rebecca. For speculative proof of my speculative concept, I want to focus on an area of the material order database that has gone relatively undeveloped, that of case studies, use cases and case studies of materials, how and where they've been used. Most of the project team members are librarians or collection managers, and few, if any, are subject specialists, material scientists, engineers, etc. So how can we use AI to make up for this potential deficiency in subject knowledge or real-world application, and at the same time, build research relevance and capacity in the system? For this exercise, after some preliminary exploration of other AI models such as ChatGPT, and consulting with more knowledgeable colleagues in my network of youth spies, I chose the AI I called Agent GPT based on its research capabilities. So here's the link where you can just search for Agent GPT, but please do that later. So what is Agent GPT? Agent GPT is an autonomous AI tool built on the generative pre-trained transformer. Had to look that up. GPT 3.5 and 4 models that does not require specific prompts or inputs. Instead, Agent GPT creates tasks, executes research, and synthesizes the results independently. And it learns from its own experiences by creating its own prompts and tasks for itself until it solves the macro goal. How does Agent GPT do this? Per its architecture and workflow, the AI gathers data from various sources and trains its AI model. Once trained, the model is tested with new data and adjustments are made as needed. It's then deployed by a bot or a web interface that I will show you soon. So Agent GPT is obviously web-based. It does have a free option and is easy to use. Subscription options allow the user to create more than 5 agents per day that are in the free plan, as well as have more loops per agent. You can sign up with your Google credentials, as you'll see in the lower left. I'm actually signed in on the screen grab, or Google credentials or common authentication protocols, allowing you to save your work. So I originally wanted to show the AI via live internet connection, as it's really fascinating to watch it cascade through its tasks. But I decided to walk more slowly through the steps, as it can be a little dense at first. So let's create an agent and see what we get. At the very top, you'll see I created an agent called Material Order Akoya, with the goal to find use cases and case studies for Akoya acetylated wood. We immediately see it embarking on that new goal by adding 3 tasks: to research the properties and benefits of Akoya, to identify industries or applications that can benefit from Akoya, and to research existing use cases or case studies of Akoya. We see it executing that first task, and the bottom of the screen shows it has finished that task. Here we see executed results of that first task, having searched relevant sources such as research papers, industry publications, and case study databases. So this is already really useful, but it keeps going. In this next section, we see it working on that second task of those initial 3, searching the web, finishing the search, and executing the results. In the same slide, we see it working on the third task. And then we see the completed and executed search results for that final initial task. As with the previous tasks, we see hyperlinked sources throughout. Agent GPT then adds another task to further refine its results to meet that original goal, this time executing separate searches for use cases and case studies each. It has finished that search and will compile the findings for both. And here is that compilation with, again, equivalent sources. It has now added another task to find case studies in the field of architecture and the marine industry, architectural projects, and so on. It's elaborating on those various applications. We see that it searches the web and then completes the search again. It then adds further tasks to find case studies of Akoya in these other areas. And here is the final executed summary of use cases and case studies for Akoya simulated wood. In each step, information is gathered that can be useful to enhance the material order record for Akoya. And so I can only say that this is more of a description than we've entered into that already complete record in the material order database. So this may in fact identify typical uses that we may not have already entered into that shared authority file. The final summary report, this final summary report may be very useful to students researching this material or even just for our own edification about our holdings. And I will say I had to shrink the screen to sort of do one graph on this, but right below it is the ability to either delete this, save it, or export it, or share it. So let's take a look at Google. Compare this to search results via Google of the same search prompt. We're possibly desensitized to how unsatisfying Google searching can be, but it really takes considerably more effort to discern useful results. And also, please take note, I don't know if you can see it at the very bottom, and actually, the very second result has actually scrubbed half the terms I wanted it to search on. So I kind of want Google to not do that. So here's ChatGPT executing the same prompts. It does so in a very clean and coherent fashion, and this alone would be a helpful approach in and of itself. The top view shows the major categories for the use of Akoya. However, it does not approach any synthesis of Akoya, of its findings or reporting, per the research-oriented goal. We see ChatGPT continuing with less common uses of Akoya, and it finishes with the results outlined with a short summary. And so please notice that nowhere in the GPT results are citations or hyperlinks. So what could this mean? Neither Lyricist nor Collection Space currently have plans for incorporating AI. Collection Space is a sort of like community-managed or community-partnered platform, so it responds to the things we identify and prioritize as users in terms of enhancements. So that would be partially up to the user community to stress that we want AI incorporated. So nothing is happening anytime soon regarding incorporating AI into material order. But let's imagine AI could fill in relevant fields in the back end that the librarian or cataloger reviews. The media ingest process, which is how we add digital images of materials, could prompt AI to catalog the fields related to color, shape, and maybe even size. AI could identify donated materials that come to the library without any identification at all. WordPress, or the front end, could incorporate an AI like Agent GPT to allow patrons using that front end to generate these kind of citation-based research summaries. AI could provide assistive translation technology to a community comprised by a large number of non-native English speakers. It could bridge a research gap for a non-scientific community of visual learners to aid in concept mapping, project inspiration, and material specification and selection. And then Material Order, with its 5 partner schools, has a very heterogeneous project team. So we're all coming at it from different educational backgrounds, yet managing collections of very different profiles and scopes, and then of course serving varying office audiences. And so this kind of level of learning could connect us all more deeply and meaningfully by GPTs like Chat and Agent. So I'd like to conclude by bringing this back to the mission and potential material collections to engage and represent materiality and all of its interrogations, and then create with the goal to create material literacy both for inspiration and research by our users. And so here's another screen grab just from another email from a couple months ago. I kept it just because it sounded funny to me. So AI can be really dumb, but it's still a good tutor. And so maybe even right now that's good enough for us, because we certainly could use some help in critical areas. Thank you.
Next up then is our last lightning talk. This will be presented by Jerry Jenkins. Jerry is the curator of emerging formats in contemporary British and Irish published collections at the British Library. And I swear this was an accident, also a former chair of RLCK, but also an indispensable chair of our conference working party. So Jerry's going to speak to us about ways that AI can be used in cataloguing and creating mark records at the British Library. So please welcome Jerry Jenkins.
Thank you, Aoife. Thanks, just to start off, thank you for the introduction. And yes, when I'm not here, I am at the British Library and I'm working in contemporary British language collections. What that means in real uninstitutional language, we're responsible for collecting published material from 2001 up to the last night. I spend a lot of my time helping to supplement the legal deposit collections within the British Library and developing, particularly around fine press and art books. As a result, so yes, you'll be aware on the morning of the 28th of October last year, the British Library became the victim of a cyber attack which had catastrophic results, rendering practically all our library systems inoperable. As a result, it was impossible to access, process, order, catalogue, communication, some very, even by the telephone, you know. So this was so as a result of this, has caused many issues. Obviously, you'll understand that it's a sensitive subject, and if you're interested in this aspect, I can't really talk too much about it, but I've supplied a link to our page which has a number of documents that can be downloaded and give you more details about our response and some of the issues around it. So I'd urge you, if that's an area that interests you, you'll find the information there. So on to actually what I want to talk about today is as a result of this, obviously, it was impossible for me to work with the material I've acquired over in recent times, and I'm continuing to require. Quickly, obviously, colleagues came in and introduced a number of various workarounds in all areas of the institution to assist readers to get works out of the collections, etc., etc. But one of the things that was troubling me, as you're all probably aware, and the issues around how institutions such as libraries are resourced these days, we're always kind of fighting against resource issues and constant pressures. So what I was keen that didn't happen is that there was a backlog built up any more than there is as well. Despite these issues, we're still accepting material through legal deposit. So if you're a depositor, I'll just, please keep sending your materials to us. Nevertheless, we continue to catalogue onto spreadsheets, which will be then uploaded into the library system once it's up and running again and things. So what I needed to do, not being a cataloguer, I needed to work out a way quickly where I could put together a basic record which then could be passed on to my cataloguers to create records in this records that then could subsequently be uploaded into the catalogue. I'm not a cataloguer. I've had a catalogue experience many years ago, but to spend a great deal of time doing that, so I thought ChatGPT and other generative AI models are very useful in creating frameworks such as HTML and things like that. I wonder what would happen if I asked it to create a MARC record for me and then feed it information to populate it. So firstly, I wanted to establish, did it actually know what a marked record was? So I basically asked it. So what would I do if I needed to catalogue a book, basically? And it came back with these responses, which was quite helpful for me so gather information. So in this exercise, what I did, I had a subset of obviously newly acquired material. So I had 3 basic sources of information. I had the prospectus about the material that was either electronic or physical. I had the material itself, e.g. title page, colophon, etc. And also, on one occasion, I had other catalogue records. So those were the 3 sources that I gathered information. Choose a marked format. I asked for mark 21 because that's the standard we use at the library. In terms of access to mark templates, as I mentioned, we are working to spreadsheets at the moment. Assigning subject headings, maybe we'll talk about that a little later. Call number, the system to generate call numbers for the library collection is also offline. There's another workaround that hopefully there's an email in my inbox telling me that that can be resolved when I get back from conference. And review and verify, and what we're going to do in a bit is have a look at some of these examples which have been reviewed and verified by a cataloguer rather than myself, who has put some comments down to show how useful or not this piece of work is. And the other ones, testing and integration and maintenance, will be further down the line in the project. So from that situation, what I needed to do is, again, I wanted to speak to ChatGPT. I chose ChatGPT because it was the one I was most familiar with. I was considering trying and comparing different front-end things, but I thought on this project I would just stick to one, not to have too many variables in it. I was concerned then when I queried it, it would tell me that its data set was to January 2022, which I found interesting. Its data set didn't include library catalogues and various things like that. So that was interesting. So what I would do, in this case, example on the board, you can see, obviously I'm logged in and I'm using the basic, which at the time was 3.5, now I believe it's 4. And I was following up on the information it had given me. I wanted a more specific citation, and I was quite struck by its response, which is it's about an Iranian-born book artist, Batul Shugami, who's London-based, and we've acquired some of her works recently. So I wanted to check the information it was giving back to me and try and get a reference out of it. And it seemed to respond, as you could see there, that as with my previous response is general knowledge and not sourced on any specific reference, external reference. It's not possible to cite a specific source for it, which I found somewhat, well, anyway. So moving on from there, I realised the parameters, that it was more important to provide information. So in this, I've pulled out 3 examples from things I was working on. They're all relatively recent artist books. They're all slightly different, as in David Arms, it's a fine press, traditionally printed book. Alejandro Atkins' Restless History is more of a photo books and more of a, and obviously Andrew Mockett's is a uses woodcut printings just to see what came up. So as I said, with David Arms' book, I generally refer to his prospectuses, and what we see here is in the black rectangle is the information, the record that the ChatGPT gave back to me when given the basic information from the prospectus. Okay, the red pop-outs is my colleague Annalisa Riccardi, who's a cataloguer and also a member of the ARLIS Cataloguing and Classification Committee, who has gone through and examined these records, and these are predominantly our comments after that. So there's some technical material in there that points out where there are possibly issues, which I'm sure many of you will spot better than I will, just being, but I think what is interesting in this exercise is this method provides a very basic framework for us to base actual work on. So in essence, it may be seen as a labour-saving device where we can get a basic framework down and then spend more time enhancing a record and getting more information in there which relates to a particular type or the sorry, my word escaped me, a particular edition or a particular copy-specific information, etc. So that's yeah. So that's you see. Yeah, this one is interesting. You'll see on the 650 field, it confuses its topic and subject things. So, you know, by no means is it a perfect solution, but it possibly is an interesting place to start. Obviously, this is very much a work in process, and you know, something that I'm midway through. But I hope that this sort of little look into this methodology might be helpful in some way, or at least be of some use. And just to finish, here are the actual physical books, because it's always good to have books. Anyway, thank you very much for your attention, and thanks for the opportunity to present today. Thank you.
I'm excited to speak with you all today about the Collaborative Art Archive, or CARTA, and share more info about how this work by a team of librarians and archivists encourages the use of open data, machine learning, and AI for digital art history. I'm Beth Seymour. I'm a program officer here at the Internet Archive, and I work on the community programs team in the Archiving and Data Services Division. If you're unfamiliar with the Internet Archive, we are a nonprofit building a digital library of internet sites and other cultural artifacts in digital form. Our mission is to provide universal access to all knowledge. We began in 1996 by archiving the internet itself, then a medium that was just beginning to grow, and 28 plus years later we have access to billions of websites through the Wayback Machine, and we work with over 1,200 library and other partners through our Archivist program to identify important web pages for preservation. Like I said, I'm in community programs here, which is CARTA is situated in. Our community programs team at the Internet Archive, and in short, community programs supports collaborative development of web-based collections. Our team helps memory and research organizations around the world provide universal access to all knowledge, our mission, and we achieve this mission through programs backed by the Internet Archive's internationally distributed nonprofit infrastructure and services. So we work with partners to develop sustainable efforts that respond directly to those community needs. Our priorities are to increase preservation of and access to underrepresented and or under-resourced knowledge, strengthen memory worker and researcher communities, create and contribute to open and interoperable knowledge infrastructures, and support responsible computational engagement with the cultural record. Delving more into CARTA and sharing more about CARTA before I talk all about our interest in computational reuse of our collections. CARTA is, like I said, the collaborative art archive, and it's a project that utilizes the resources of the Internet Archive and this professional expertise of this collaborative group of arts and cultural heritage institutions in order to build collections of archive web-based content related to art history and contemporary art practice. CARTA was developed from a partnership between the Internet Archive and the New York Art Resources Consortium, or NYARC. Just a little background about NYARC. It was formed in 2006 and consists of the libraries and archives of the Museum of Modern Art, the Frick Collection, and the Brooklyn Museum in New York City. NYARC members, especially their head of web archiving, Seymour Duncan, who is a really important CARTA collaborator, realized that one institution does not have the capacity to cover all of the pertinent art and art history material on the web, and this solidified a desire to bring in additional art library colleagues to become involved in web archiving to contribute to the overall picture, one that isn't just specific to New York City or urban centers, and one that's not just concentrated within the United States. And so given the Internet Archive's long history of facilitating community collaboration in their community programs and their technical expertise and infrastructure, we partnered with NYARC to begin investigating an appropriate entity and cohort, and pursued grant funding to further this effort with the goal to build upon and scale the consortial model that NYARC had established. This project originated from a 2018 IMLS grant. So this is the Institute of Museum and Library Services in the States, and this allowed the Internet Archive and NYARC to begin these environmental scans for this initiative and bringing in art library colleagues together in forums to have conversations about how we could create this collaborative model. And we were fortunate to receive an additional two-year grants from the IMLS and the National Endowment for the Humanities. And these grants allowed us to officially launch CARTA in August of 2021. And we began formalizing the collaborative then, building the collections, and so much more in these past couple of years. The overall goals and activities of CARTA are to promote access to a digital art reference and research materials, enable new types of scholarly use for art-related resources, ensure that the art historical record of the 21st century is readily available far into the future. And these goals encompass community building, collection building, facilitating research and access methods, and sustainability and promotion. Talk about all of this in a moment. And we focus our efforts on specifically creating the CARTA Web Archive collections, preserving content nominated by our members, supplying metadata to organize and describe the web archives that we're preserving, building the CARTA Access Portal, and promotion of use of the collections with end users and researchers through hosting datathons and sharing our data sets to support computational use of our collections. These are our participants to date. And as far as community building goes, our initial goal was 30 members. Within the first year, we exceeded that goal. We've had 41 members to date. And our membership includes a wide range of organization types and sizes, and that's intentional. So some of these are smaller art libraries and regional museums, to academic institutions, national museums, and arts organizations. Our members also have a geographic range throughout the United States and Canada. And we're continually expanding to include more member organizations to enrich our collection and, of course, fill in subject expertise gaps and regional gaps. We would love to expand internationally, including in the UK and Ireland. I'll hit on that at the end if you're interested in us and joining our collaborative. But it would be really great to have representatives that are not currently reflected in our membership roster and collections. Based on early feedback we received from our members, we identified 8 Web Archive collection topics that web archives that are nominated by our members fall into. So they're listed here. There are criticism, arts education, arts fairs and events, art galleries, art history and scholarship, arts organizations, artist websites, and auction houses. I'd also like to note the accompanying description and just organization of these were created by our members, specifically the Collection Development Subcommittee. And CARTA members began nominating websites to form the collections in November 2021. So we've had over 2 years of collecting, and we're continuing to accept more nominations and continue to grow the collections. And just to be clear, CARTA members are not actually doing this web archiving process on their own. That is something we at the Internet Archive are handling with our team of web archivists. And so we really want our members to focus on collection development, engaging researchers and end users, and promotion and outreach for the collaborative. And this is a breakdown of our collection. Currently we have over 900 websites in our collection and 16 terabytes of data. And as you can see, the current majority of our websites fall under arts organizations and artist websites. And these are collection areas that also have a significant number of at-risk websites. We were building this archive during the COVID-19 pandemic, so we were prioritizing members, were prioritizing smaller arts organizations and artists that were at risk of just not having their websites maintained anymore, and this has been the case. There have been examples of websites going dark and where they are only accessible within the current collections. So also, just to mention our membership and all the work they put into this, due to the amount of work of forming the archive, we also had a metadata subcommittee who established and integrated metadata standards into the collections, and of course, this is leveraging the expertise of librarians and archivists who are our members. So really thankful for that, and because of that work, we have standardized metadata to aid in discovery on the CARTA portal, which launched in April 2023. So this is where we provide unified access to CARTA collections. And this is the homepage of the portal. Another example of our collaborative spirit, is our CARTA logo, which was designed by one of our members, Rachel McPherson at the National Gallery of Art Library. And the portal includes collections, so it includes the CARTA collections, but it also includes more than 70 collections and 20 terabytes of data from arts-related collections that were created prior to the start of CARTA. So these are from basically other archive partners and Internet Archive partners who had arts-related collections, and they opted in to have them shared with the CARTA portal, so they're all accessible here. And just like any other digital collections website, you can search by the metadata that's provided from our members, contributing organization, collection site. We have advanced search for page text. We have the facets or the filters in the left-hand sidebar on the screen, which has the ability to narrow your results. And again, this is all because of our members describing and taking care of these web archive collections, not just putting them online, but actually making it a resource that's usable. Not really related to the talk today, but I do just love to talk about our partners and like what they focus on. And one strength of CARTA that I think is particularly beneficial to members is the ability to select your collecting focus based on your institutional priorities. But also, excuse me, so you can focus on your institutional priorities, but you also know that your nominations or the websites that you're selecting are contributing to the greater picture of digital art history resources on the web. So for instance, this is a slide that demonstrates the nominations, some recent nominations from the Getty Research Institute, and they focus on Southern California artists and organizations. They have a particular topic or theme each nomination quarter. Some themes that they've had so far have been arts writing and publishing, arts education, Southern California desert art sites, alternative art fairs, and art spaces in domestic settings. And they also try to prioritize at-risk websites. So these are some recent captures, archive websites. Just point out a few. The Lost Photos Project has a mission to elevate the voices of teenage girls and gender-expansive youth in communities of color in Los Angeles through photography. There's also the Black Image Center which is a collected group of young Black photographers in Los Angeles as well. So this is Megan Salavedras, our librarian contact CARTA member there. This is her focus, but alternatively, we also have members who have more of a national or international collecting focus and prioritize really important resources for all of art history study, like auction houses and auction sales, biennales, websites, and other contemporary art fair websites. So all of these, again, contribute to the greater preservation initiative of CARTA. Like I said, one of our important components of community webs and, of community programs, of the objectives and deliverables of the grant period and of the overall goals of the collaborative was to encourage computational use of the collection. So this has been at the forefront of one of our goals from the formation of the collaborative. And we began this work during the grant by developing and executing a series of hands-on workshops, or datathons as we call them, where participants learn how to use data analysis and web archiving tools while utilizing data sets that were derived from the CARTA Web Archive collections. And so these are just images of one of our datathons in late summer of last year, 2023, at the National Gallery of Art. Some more information about our datathons is that we in our approach to them is that we centered the characteristics of our datathons around being accessible, context-rich, asset-based, extensible, and sustainable. So these datathons were for librarians and archivists to assist them with supporting researchers wanting to work with web archive collections. We used real-world examples with discipline-specific examples in our materials. And we utilized the expertise of the participants with open discussion, so hearing from their experiences and any questions or scenarios that they had. And we designed these datathons to be modular, scaling from 1 hour to full day events. And they had an emphasis on providing open educational resources, so the workshop materials were well documented, using stable tools, and tutorials were created afterwards to accommodate varying levels of expertise. During the datathons, we introduced participants to web archives as primary resources in the context of computational or research questions, developed familiarity with research use cases that make use of web archives, and provided an opportunity to provide a hands-on experience creating web archive collections and computationally analyzing them with Archives Research Compute Hub, or ARCH, more on that in a minute, and third-party tools. So this is a screenshot of one of our tutorials, one of our modules from the datathons, of using a text export from CARTA collections and visualizing that in Buoyant. And we're really happy to report we had a high level of interest and positive feedback from the workshops in the series. At the close of the workshops, participants were eager to discuss web archive research ethics, research use cases, like I said, their institutions that they've heard, and a diverse set of approaches to scaling library support for researchers who are interested in working with web archive collections. And at the end of the grant period, we outlined all of our approaches and our lessons learned from the datathons in a white paper called CARTA Promoting Computational Research with R on the Web. It's available on archive.org. And additionally, in line with our open educational resources platform and what we're trying to accomplish, is we share the research data sets that are used in these datathons as well on archive.org. And I have these linked in my slides, so I'm hoping those will be shared with participants because it's a really long URL, so hopefully that will be shared with you all. And one thing I want to revisit, and that's really important to our work, is ARCH Archives Research Compute Hub. Like I said, we've used this at the workshops, and participants were introduced to it. So ARCH is a platform for building, analyzing, and engaging computationally with digital collections, including web archives that were created and maintained by the Internet Archive. ARCH supports computational research with these collections at scale, including text and data mining opportunities, data science approaches, digital scholarship publishing, machine learning, and more. ARCH does this by streamlining generation and access to more than a dozen research-ready web archive datasets, including CARTA. It has in-browser visualization, dataset analysis, and open dataset publication all available within the platform. And so ARCH allows you to generate datasets from archive collections right now. And then you can analyze these data sets directly within ARCH with their analysis tools and visualization tools, or you can use a third-party analysis tool like the Buoyant example that I just had a screenshot of before. And right now, like I said, Web Archive collections are the basis for the data sets in Arch, but we are working to expand it beyond Web Archive collections for more digital collections analysis. We're excited by this. We think this is a big step towards facilitating computational research with Web Archives, in that it allows researchers to easily reach the point where they already have a usable collection to work with and to analyze. And we're still working on Arch. It's still being continuously developed. I'm going to talk about some new things that are coming up, but there are already openly available Arch tutorials online that demonstrate the different things that you can do with the tool, and they also demonstrate these techniques using Carta datasets, which we really love to see. So you don't need an Arch account to try these tutorials. There's different ones available that allow you to visualize connections between web domains with raw graphs, graph a network of web domains with Palladio or Gephi, browse images in a web archive with Palladio. That one's been very popular given the visual resources history that our dataset has. Mine text with Voyant, that was the example I demonstrated in the prior slide, and then explore web archive data with the command line, like in Jupyter Notebooks, if you're familiar with that. We also have another tutorial available, and this is through a blog post that was published on the Internet Archive blog. And this is an example of an AI reuse of one of Carta's collections by Hugging Face. The Hugging Face Hub, excuse me, is a central repository which provides access to open source machine learning models, if you haven't heard of them before. They also have datasets and demos available in their hub. Currently, the hub has over 150,000 openly available machine learning models that cover a broad range of tasks. And in their tutorial that they published, they use Carta collections to show how a specific set of open source machine learning models can help you explore a large data set through image search, image classification, and model training. Using their models in this example, they displayed images pulled from the Carta collections and used CLIP, or contrastive language image pre-training in this model. Is used to compare the images. And with this, they were able to search the images to learn about image similarity within the Carta dataset. And as I mentioned in their findings, one particular use case of this could be identifying a particular artist's work within a broader collection or within a corpora. Additionally, in their tutorial, they use an image classification model to categorize the images from a list of possible labels, and they use another model to support defining labels on your own and then using that to classify the data set. So there's a couple different ways you could approach it there. And so these are just some of the possibilities for additional computational analysis with AI of Carta collections. And briefly, like I mentioned, Arch is still in development, and we have some exciting new things coming up that we believe will benefit digital art historians in the field of digital art history. So working closely with our museum partners, some of which are mentioned on the slide here, we're adding models for image object analysis, color analysis, and handwritten text recognition. So this is, on this slide, I have a screenshot of an image object analysis recognition. This is not from our project, this is from an existing project of Harvard, so just wanted to make that clear, but wanted to have something to illustrate it. But one such use case that a partner is interested in is using recognition technology of handwritten text on artworks. So this is something that we're building into Arch, like I said, and so they're hoping to use this to have, to mine these descriptions of their collections and better analyze them at scale and see how they can be used for maybe search and discovery of their collections. So we're excited to apply these new technologies to the Carta datasets as well and create more tutorials and educational resources with the Carta datasets and these new Arch developments. And we're not done there, even though the grant has ended. We still are looking forward to hosting some more datathons very soon. We're pleased to announce that we'll be hosting more due to a recent award from the Samuel H. Kress Foundation for Digital Art History in the Lab, advancing research with web archives, Pardon me. And so during this grant, we'll develop and deliver more virtual and in-person datathons, accommodating a wide range of audience, particularly focused on digital art historians and digital humanists as a professional development skill building opportunity for those groups. And again, it's focused for those who want to work computationally with web archives. So we're just getting started on the grant work this month, so it's still very new. But if you're interested in these workshops or these datathons, especially maybe the virtual ones or in person if you're traveling, They will take place in fall of this year, and then winter and spring 2025. So stay tuned if you are interested in those. I'm at time, but I quickly just want to, not quickly, I just want to emphasize that, from our viewpoint, I think it's pretty evident that web archives are an unparalleled record of contemporary knowledge production, and we need to be able to continue as librarians and archivists to support multiple ways of engaging with them or research inquiry. Researchers benefit from coordinating collecting activities by groups like CARTA, which result in more representative collection resources, as well as better described resources coming from our expertise as librarians and archivists, better organized, better described. And coordination among organizations and groups like CARTA helps reach a collection scale that's not possible individually. It is best for us, at least, and we believe for other collaboratives to leverage these complementary resources and expertise. And as web archives grow and take a more central place in inquiry, it's important to continue exploring methods and models for promoting computational use of computational research with web archives, We, so for us as a group, in line with this, we are continuing to grow our membership, grow our collections, have more opportunities to have datathons and promote our collections as open educational resources. Our members, our group has transitioned from grant funding, so our grants have ended, and we have transitioned to a sustainable membership model that can continue to support collecting and preserving at-risk web-based art resources, and continue to grow to allow new members to participate, including possibly some members in the UK and Ireland. If you're interested, like I said, we are interested in expanding internationally. We would love to have representation from the UK and Ireland, so please reach out if you would like to participate. We also have developed self-governance of the group. We have a new advisory board made up of members, and so they're helping us with sort of new directions and thinking about what we could do next to continue to build our collections and have CARTA-related activities. And I think that's it. I just want to say thank you for letting me record in advance with the time difference. A special thank you to CARTA members, NIARC, the Internet Archive and its partners, all of who are vital to the program. If you have any questions, I would love to hear from you. And yeah, like I said, we would love to have CARTA across the pond, if you will. So thank you again.
So our next speakers in person are Nicola, Bingham and Helena Byrne from the UK, from the British Library, who are here to talk to us about data in the UK Web Archive.
Hi, hello everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Nicola. I'm with my colleague Helena. We've been very nicely set up there with a talk about web archiving from Sarah from the Internet Archive. Self and Helena are from the UK Web Archive, which is based at the British Library, but is a collaboration between these organisations, the UK Legal Deposit Libraries. The infrastructure and the services are administered by the British Library on behalf of the other UK Legal Deposit Libraries, and it's physically based at Boston Spa in Yorkshire, which is where I've come down from this morning. So we collect, preserve, give access to online materials for researchers now and in the future. By researchers, we mean academic researchers, we mean members of the public, teachers, students, anybody with an interest in this content. We began selectively archiving websites in 2004, but in 2013, non-print legal deposit legislation was enacted, which enabled us, the legal deposit libraries, to collect UK websites at scale. So web archiving is conducted on a large whole domain scale using state-of-the-art web archiving crawlers. The content is stored for long-term preservation at the British Library, and processes such as indexing are carried out to ensure access and discoverability. It's a huge data set. It's about 2 petabytes of data. It contains millions of websites and billions of individual items.
So access and search of the Web Archive collection is a challenge. According to the regulations, we can only make this collection available on site, so that's in legal deposit library reading rooms, unless we have additional permissions from website owners to make the content available, but that represents a very small percentage of the collection, probably 1% or less. There's no direct access to the collection for data mining or computational access, but what we can do is make secondary data or metadata openly available. So that's what we're talking about today. Because this collection is so large, we need to figure out ways of making the collection more accessible. And so with researcher needs in mind, we put a lot of effort into curating collections, and we do this with partners within the libraries but external to the libraries. We build collections around the thematic subjects, we build collections around events and rapid response collections in response to unfolding events. So at the moment we're very busy archiving the UK general election, but we've also built collections in response to unplanned events, for example the COVID-19 pandemic. And in terms of thematic collections, we've got several arts collections. We work with independent arts organisations. We worked with the Live Art Development Agency to build a large collection. We also have collections, I think, about artist books and about the history of the book as well. Jeremy is one of our very active Web Archive curators. So, so talking about artificial intelligence and how this can help us, we have been investigating a project around data sheets, and this is a pioneering project which is adopting a method from the machine learning field to improve description and documentation of Web Archive datasets. And so this project enhances access to and understanding of our digital collections, but it also gives us a framework for assessing the implications of artificial intelligence in library and archival practices. There's currently no standardised method for identifying how datasets are created, including their characteristics, motivations, potential biases, and the contextual information that the researchers need to have available when they are looking at Web Archive datasets. And so to address this, Emily Maimura, who is an assistant professor in the School of Information Sciences at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, has been developing this model for Web Archives with my colleague Helena Byrne. And this work by Emily and Helena is based on early work by Gabriel et al. Of Cornell University, who proposed data sheets for datasets, which introduced standard documentation for datasets, but used in the documenting data sheets of components in the electronic industry. So the work that Helena and Emily have been doing is to adapt these data sheets from the electronics industry to talk about Web Archives. So the aim is to publish our curated collections as data, and we want to do this in several different formats, so in CSV, TSV or JSON format, and these data sheets are very imminently going to be published through the British Library's Research Repository. The British Library's Research Repository is currently available. Jenny was explaining a little bit about the cyber attack at the British Library, and that means, unfortunately, the UK Web Archive is currently unavailable, but the research repository, yes, it is. So I'm going to hand over to you, Helena, and hopefully your microphone works.
Is this working? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. The light's red, so I wasn't sure if that means go or not. So, data sheets for datasets, as Nicola mentioned, originally the concept was developed by Gabriel et al. And it was developed for machine learning datasets for used in AI, because we all know they've got lots of biases inbuilt to them. But if you understand a little bit more about the data that you're using to build these AI models that should hopefully help mitigate them against these potential biases, should be more aware of them. And Emily was looking into this as a research topic and wanted to answer the question, can we use data sheets to describe the provenance of web archives supporting research uses? Because a lot of these AI models use information scraped from the web. So that's where we came in with the UK Web Archive, because we have the data. So we were looking at how we could apply this model to our collections we wanted to publish as data sets. So in order to understand what the best way to go about this, we ran a number of workshops last year. So we had, so the model, the data sheets for data sets model has gone through a few reforms, and we used the A4 data documentation template, which only has 31 questions in 9 sections, whereas the original one had over 50 questions, so that was a little bit too large to work into our workshop. So what we did was we used the Moscow project management framework to prioritize these questions into the order of must have, should have, could have, or won't have this time. And we had 33 participants over 4 workshops, but we also had 2 pilot workshops to kind of figure out the running order and what best way to do these. And you can just see some images there of the questions or the coloured cards, and we printed them all out into, we had a maximum of 8 packs of people working in pairs to sort through the questions into the, using the Moscow ranking framework. And then we had these paper sheets up on the top. You can see there's the must, could, should have, won't have, and then the participants wrote the number, question number beside them. So that's how we organised the workshops. And there's a few more questions then of how participants sorted them out. And then the findings. So these are the initial card sorting findings. So in our final model that we're going to be publishing very soon, it's just very slightly different. But you can see that there was very little consensus on what is a must. Question number 1 is title. So, so that was definite consensus. But you can kind of just see, get a sense of the different interpretations. And then this is the same, but it's just a different way to present that information. And I will say that most of the participants in these workshops were coming from metadata or cataloging experts. So they probably were self-censoring themselves on what they should include as a must, because they understand when it comes to day-to-day work of actually cataloging and adding metadata for content that you've got very limited time and a lot of resources to get through. So they probably were maybe a bit more reserved on what they were allocating as a must and then a should. So we also had, at the end of the workshops, we had discussions. And some of these had varied interpretations of the exercises. So the context for the BL case versus participants' own data sets. So we only had 1 workshop at a Web Archiving Pacific conference. So this, you know, so most of the audience's participants weren't always working day to day with Web Archive content. So maybe they had different interpretation of looking at it from the perspective of the type of content they're cataloging or adding metadata to versus Web Archives, which has some overlap but maybe slightly different in some cases. What can be answered right now with available resources versus aspirational goals. So attention towards won't, if there isn't confidence in the answers, in accuracy, ability to find answers. So one of the sections that was the most kind of controversial and raised the most discussion was about representativeness. So with, when you're training AI models, you try to be very representative. But with Web Archive collections, you can't be confident in the answers of how representative you are, because this is a snapshot curated by either one person or a small group of people. And you don't know what everything on the web is published in this topic, so you can't actually confidently answer that this is representative of that topic. So granularity, so which questions apply to that level of data sets versus level of the whole web archives. And who decides? Who is responsible? The researchers versus curators. So for us, when we're curating collections, we try to give a general overview of the subject area, but we can't always anticipate what the researchers want from those collections. We just try to be as broad as possible so that researchers can then make their own interpretations. We don't want to give those interpretations to the end users. So the next steps. So we have developed a toolkit. And this toolkit provides information on the curation of data sheets for Web Archive datasets. The toolkit is composed of several parts, so it includes templates that you can reuse, examples. So we have, we're going to have a number of collections coming out very soon that we've developed. We've developed data sheets for, and then also a data dictionary to accompany these data sets, so that it's a bit easier to interpret what is the data that we've published, and guidance documentation and some reflections on working on this project. So although this is specifically geared towards web archives, it'll be applicable to any digital collections that you're publishing. So maybe if you're publishing data sets from your catalogs or from your collections, you could also apply this framework to it as well. And this is an example of some of the data that we're publishing. So the first, so these are the 3 collections we have. So we've got the Indian Tsunami, Ocean Tsunami, December 2004 collection seed list. And this is going to be published in CSV and JSON format. And this was the very first web archive collection ever done. And so it's quite a small one. And then we've got blogs collection. So this is one that was kind of started quite early on in the UK Web Archive, but you know, inactively curated until quite recently. And then the UEFA Women's Euros England 2022 collection seed list, also in CSV and JSON. So we've kind of got from the whole span of the Web Archive collections that were done earlier in the collection through different metadata systems, maybe not as much documentation available, so how easy was it to actually retrospectively answer the questions on the data sheet that seed list, and to be honest, it was quite easy. So don't be put off by doing things retrospectively, even if you don't have much contextual information about the collection. Up until more recently, and I was the lead curator of the UEFA Women's Euros collection, so that was even easier for me to be able to answer those questions on the data sheet framework. And then the first little bit you can see with per collection ID is what the CSV looks like, and then the bottom one is then what the JSON looks like. And that's for the first one is for the Tsunami collection, the second one is for UEFA Women's collection. So you can just see how the information is presented. And then, so this is just some insights into what the documentation in the toolkit looks like. So this is an example. So we have a question guide. So for each question in the datasheets framework, there is other comments is for the interpretation specifically for web archives, but it might be also applicable to some of the types of collections you might want to publish as well. Whereas the considerations, additional prompts was from the framework itself. So this is an example from one of the questions recommended that we answered. So it's question 3 is data set owner, manager, we've got the answer there. We've added some notes to help us then to interpret it, you know, maybe slightly different for other people. So, and then how representative, so that was quite a specific point of discussion in our workshops. And it gives some examples there. And then this is from the data description format for the dictionary. So we were filling in the data sheets framework, and then we had our data sets that we published, and then we were still noticing a gap. So how do you interpret what the columns in, let's say if you got a CSV file, what do the individual columns mean? You know, what actually information are we giving to the end user? And even amongst ourselves, we actually had a little bit of debate about what do they mean, those columns. So we developed a data dictionary, and in the data dictionary, each column in, let's say, a CSV file will have a name, a description, a data type, an example, and the origin. So where does that information come from was quite useful. So, and we found that once we developed, answered these questions on the data sheet and the data dictionary for one collection, it was very easy to do multiple collections. So the first one took a bit of time to fill in, but the rest of them were actually very quick. And the data dictionary did for the final example I was doing, I took about 5 minutes because the origin is the same across all the collections that I'm exporting from. So it was actually quite quick to implement these new workflows. And a little bit more about the data dictionaries. So each data set will have an individual data dictionary that gives specific examples and tells you what the field is. And we've produced a blank template, so you can also pick this up for your own collections if you want to publish them. And this is where you're going to be able to access the toolkit, but it's not quite published yet, but we have the page ready, and it will be coming in the next couple of days. And Nicola previously mentioned the live art collection that we've worked on in the Web Archive, and that will be published in the next week or two as well. So that's seed list, a data dictionary, and a data sheet. Explain the contextual information around that collection. So maybe that might be of interest too if you have people coming to your libraries looking for data sets to work with around art. And some reflections. So knowing your data made it much easier to fill in the data sheets in the data dictionary. Creating data sheets is just one step in the process. So once we get them published, we need to promote them and make them more, let people know that they're available to use. And once the workflow is established, setup time is relatively quick. And to consider what additional information is necessary to facilitate the reuse of these data sets. So ensure there's no assumed knowledge, so that the data dictionary is really helped with that, so that people can get a better understanding about what is the information that's being made available. What is the best formats to publish these collections data in? So at the moment we're publishing in CSV and JSON, but we haven't, we need to test this and see what it is that researchers may be able to in different formats. And so we should be able to adapt to that. And what is the best way to promote these data sets? So we'll be publishing blog posts about these collections being made available, but the UK Web Archive blog maybe has quite a limited reach. So is there other platforms and networks that we can reach into to help promote these collections as well? That's it, so thank you.